Rain has a strange way of hiding tears. The sky cried over the university courtyard that afternoon, and so did Elena Cruz, though no one could tell. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, her cheap graduation gown was already soaked through, and her bare feet pressed into the wet pavement as she stood under an old oak tree, clutching her rolled-up diploma like it was the most fragile treasure in the world. Around her, laughter and applause echoed, students in shining shoes and pressed suits embracing their families, snapping photos, talking about the future like it was something guaranteed. But for Elena, the moment was bittersweet. She had dreamed of this day since she was 12, when her mother used to whisper promises as they fell asleep in their one-room apartment. "When you graduate," her mother would say, "you'll wear the prettiest shoes, and the world will finally see who you are." But her mother never lived to see it. Life had taken her early, and poverty had taken everything else. Elena had worked 3 part-time jobs while studying full-time. She'd cleaned offices before sunrise, tutored high school students in the evenings, and sold handmade crafts online just to pay tuition. There were nights she slept on the university library floor, pretending to be studying when she was really too tired to go home. Yet she made it. Against all odds, she made it. Except, she had nothing decent to wear for her own graduation. She had borrowed the gown from a friend, but when it came to shoes, there was no one to help. The only pair she owned was worn thin, with holes at the soles, and she couldn't bear to wear them on this day. She'd spent the last of her savings on her final tuition fee, there was simply nothing left. So there she was, barefoot in the rain, hiding behind the iron gate, waiting for the ceremony to end so she wouldn't be noticed. Her classmates were busy taking photos, their parents showering them with flowers and gifts. Elena just watched, a faint smile trembling on her lips. "At least I made it," she whispered to herself. "That's what matters." And yet, her chest ached. That was when she saw him. He stood beside a sleek black car parked near the faculty building, a tall man in a charcoal gray suit, his hair slightly tousled by the wind. His posture was calm, his movements deliberate, as if the chaos of the world couldn't touch him. Even from a distance, there was something magnetic about him. She recognized him vaguely. He had been on campus before, visiting one of the professors. No one knew much about him, only that he wasn't a student or staff. Some said he was a donor, others thought he was a guest lecturer. Whoever he was, he didn't belong in this rain-soaked, noisy place. He looked like he had stepped out of another world, a world of quiet confidence and luxury. Elena's eyes dropped to his shoes. Black, polished leather, perfect, the kind of shoes that looked like they could buy her entire month's rent. And that's when the absurd thought hit her. Her breath caught in her throat, and she immediately shook her head. No, don't even think it. But the thought wouldn't leave. The ceremony would start in 10 minutes. She couldn't go barefoot. Her mother's words echoed again. "The world will finally see who you are." For the first time in years, Elena wished for something selfish. Just one moment, one photo where she didn't look like the poor girl. Her pulse quickened. Maybe, just maybe, if she asked, he'd laugh and say no. Or maybe he'd ignore her. But at least she'd have tried. She took a shaky step forward. Then another. When she finally stood in front of him, her voice came out small and hesitant. "Excuse me, sir." The man turned. His eyes were striking. Dark, calm, observant. He didn't look annoyed or surprised, just quietly curious. "Yes." Elena swallowed hard. I need to ask you something strange." His brows lifted slightly, but he waited. She hesitated, her hands clutching her gown nervously. "Can I borrow your shoes? Just for a few minutes?" He blinked, uncertain if he'd heard correctly. "My shoes." She nodded quickly, cheeks burning. "It sounds ridiculous, I know. I'm graduating today, but I don't have proper shoes. I'll give them right back after the ceremony. I promise." For a moment, there was only the sound of rain between them. Elena wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Then, to her surprise, he didn't laugh. He didn't question her. He simply looked at her, really looked, and then knelt slightly to unlace his shoes. "You can borrow them," he said quietly. Elena's mouth fell open. "What? No, I didn't mean to actually." "It's fine," he said gently, slipping them off and handing them to her. "I'll wait here." She stared at the shoes in her trembling hands. They were heavy, warm, still holding the imprint of his steps. For a second, she couldn't move. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. He smiled faintly. "Go. Don't be late." Her heart pounded as she slipped them on. They were far too big, and she stumbled a little, but it didn't matter. For the first time, she felt seen. The rain had stopped by the time she stepped into the auditorium. As her name was called, her classmates cheered, and Elena walked across the stage, holding her diploma high. She didn't think about her empty bank account or the uncertain future waiting for her. In that single moment, she was just another graduate, proud and whole. When the ceremony ended, the crowd poured out in laughter and celebration. Elena rushed back to the parking lot, her heart full and her shoes squelching with water. She found him exactly where she'd left him, leaning casually against the car, barefoot, unbothered by the damp ground. "I'm so sorry," she said breathlessly. "I didn't mean to keep you waiting." He shook his head. "It's all right. Did it go well?" She smiled. A genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. It was perfect. He looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing that smile. Then he took the shoes back and said quietly, "I'm glad." "Thank you," she murmured, hugging her diploma tightly. "I don't know how to repay you." "You already did." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He slipped his shoes back on, his expression thoughtful. "You reminded me what it means to fight for something real." Before she could respond, another man approached. The driver, by the looks of him. "Mr. Vale, the meeting's ready. They're waiting downtown." "Coming," the man said, then turned back to her. "Take care, Miss Elena," she said softly. "Elena," he repeated, like he wanted to remember the name. "Good luck." And with that, he stepped into the car. Elena stood there, watching as it disappeared into the misty street. Mr. Vale, she thought, so that's his name. She had no idea that Mr. Vale was Adrian Vale, CEO of Vale Tech, one of the most influential tech companies in the country. A man whose decisions shaped industries, whose wealth could rebuild cities. To him, those shoes were nothing. To her, they were everything. That night, Elena returned to her small apartment, still smiling to herself. She placed her diploma on the wall, next to a faded photo of her mother, and whispered, "I did it, Mama. I really did it." Her mother's eyes seemed to smile back at her from the frame. Elena sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was the man who had helped her, even for just a moment. She didn't know why he did it, or who he really was. But she felt something shift inside her that day, like maybe kindness still existed in a world that often forgot people like her. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian Vale sat in his office, staring out the glass window of his top-floor suite. His assistant handed him a report, but he barely glanced at it. His mind was elsewhere, on the rain-soaked girl who'd asked to borrow his shoes. In his world of billion-dollar deals and luxury boardrooms, people never asked for something so simple. They wanted power, money, opportunity. Not shoes. And yet, that small, awkward, honest moment had reminded him of who he used to be. Years ago, before the fame and the money, he'd been a struggling student too. He remembered standing in front of a scholarship committee in shoes that didn't fit, trying to prove his worth. He remembered the hunger, the humiliation, and the burning desire to be more. Somewhere along the way, success had made him forget that feeling. Until today, that girl, Elena, had looked at him with the same mix of pride and desperation he once had. It stirred something he hadn't felt in years. He smiled faintly, almost to himself. "Can I borrow your shoes?" he whispered, repeating her words. She really asked that. The memory made him laugh softly, but it wasn't mockery, it was admiration. He didn't know her story, but he wanted to. He didn't know her future, but somehow, he hoped it would cross paths with his again. Outside his office window, the rain began to fall once more, soft, rhythmic, cleansing. And for the first time in a long while, Adrian Vale didn't feel like the untouchable CEO everyone saw. He felt human, and somewhere across the city, Elena Cruz, barefoot again but smiling, felt the same. She didn't know that her one act of courage had left a mark on a man who could change her life forever. She didn't know that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. 6 months later, the rain had returned. It always seemed to follow Elena wherever she went, a quiet reminder of that day she crossed the stage barefoot in borrowed shoes. But this time, the rain didn't sting. It was gentler, softer, like an old friend. She stood outside a tall glass building in the heart of the city, clutching a folder filled with her resume and a letter she'd rewritten 10 times. The sign above the entrance read Vale Tech Innovations. Her heart pounded. She didn't know much about the company, except that it was one of the most powerful tech corporations in the country, known for its cutting-edge inventions, expensive suits, and impossible standards. She didn't belong here. Her reflection in the glass doors reminded her. Cheap uniform, tired eyes, shoes that were still scuffed at the edges. But she couldn't turn back. She had promised herself she'd never stop trying. She took a deep breath, stepped inside, and was immediately swallowed by a world that felt like another universe. Everything gleamed. Employees in crisp attire moved with purpose. The air smelled faintly of coffee and ambition. Elena clutched her folder tighter. The receptionist looked up. "Good morning. Name, Elena Cruz," she said quickly. "I have an interview for the junior project assistant position." The woman scanned her computer. "Ah, yes, you're a bit early. Please wait. Mr. Vale will see you shortly." Elena froze. "Mr. Vale?" "Yes, the CEO himself," the receptionist said, smiling politely. "You're lucky. He doesn't usually handle interviews personally." Her blood ran cold. The name hit her like thunder. Vale. It couldn't be. No. It had to be a coincidence. There were many people named Vale in the world. The chances of it being him, the man who lent her his shoes, were impossible. Right. But the thought wouldn't leave her. Minutes felt like hours as she sat in the waiting area, her palms damp. She rehearsed her answers in her head, why she wanted the job, what her strengths were, how she planned to contribute, but her thoughts kept circling back to that afternoon in the rain. Then a voice broke her trance. "Miss Cruz, he'll see you now." She stood up on shaking legs, smoothed her clothes, and followed the assistant through the hallway. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like a lifetime. When the doors opened, she was greeted by silence. The office was wide, bright, lined with glass walls that overlooked the city skyline. And there, behind a sleek black desk, sat the man she thought she'd never see again. Adrian Vale looked exactly the same, composed, distant, powerful. But when his eyes met hers, they softened, and a slow smile appeared. "I remember you," he said quietly. Elena's breath caught. You're the girl who borrowed my shoes," he finished, standing to greet her. Her face flushed crimson. I didn't realize." He gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Please, sit. I'm glad you came." The interview began awkwardly. Elena's voice trembled at first, but as she spoke about her passion for education and technology, her nerves began to fade. She told him about growing up with nothing, about wanting to create tools that helped students like her, those who dreamed big but had little. Adrian listened in silence, his chin resting on one hand. There was no judgment in his eyes, only something warmer. When she finished, she whispered, "I know I don't have experience like the others. But I'm a quick learner, and I'll work harder than anyone else here." Adrian leaned back, studying her for a long moment. Then he asked softly, "Do you still believe in the girl who walked barefoot to her graduation?" The question struck her like lightning. She blinked, unsure how to respond. I think I do. I have too. She's all I have." He smiled faintly, almost to himself. Good answer. The rest of the interview blurred. When it ended, she gathered her things, thanked him, and turned to leave, certain she'd failed. But just as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "You start Monday." She froze. Slowly, she turned around. "Wait, what?" He was smiling now, not the polite smile of a CEO, but something genuine. "You've earned it, Miss Cruz." Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," he said simply. As she left the building, the world outside felt brighter, the air lighter. For the first time in months, she felt hope again. Adrian watched her go through the glass window of his office, an emotion stirring inside him he hadn't felt in years. Something about Elena. The fire in her voice, the honesty in her struggle, reminded him of who he used to be before success dulled his soul. He told himself it was just admiration. But deep down, he knew it was something else. The weeks that followed changed everything for both of them. Elena threw herself into her work. She stayed late, asked questions, helped her colleagues even when it wasn't her job. She wasn't the smartest or most experienced, but she was relentless. Her sincerity made her stand out in a company full of people chasing promotions and titles. Adrian noticed. He watched her from afar. How she smiled even when exhausted, how she treated everyone the same, from the janitor to the board members. There was something rare about her presence. It grounded the people around her, and it grounded him. One evening, long after everyone had gone home, Adrian found her alone in the office, surrounded by notes and sketches. Her hair was tied back loosely, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She was too focused to notice him at first. "You're still here," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. She jumped slightly, then smiled sheepishly. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I was just finishing the prototype for the school access program." He glanced at her desk. Papers covered in diagrams, calculations, and scribbles. "You've been working on this off the clock. I just thought it might help," she said softly. "If kids in low-income schools could access online learning for free, they wouldn't have to give up like some of us almost did." There it was again, that word. Us. She didn't know it, but it hit him every time she said it. Adrian walked closer, picking up one of her sketches. "You're not just helping us, Elena. You're helping everyone." She looked up, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. "I just want to make a difference." He smiled, that same quiet smile she remembered from the rain. "You already are." From that night on, something changed. He began joining her late evenings, helping her refine the project, sharing stories from his early career, failures he had never told anyone else. She laughed at his dry humor, and he found himself laughing too, something he hadn't done freely in years. Rumors began to spread in the office, whispers of the CEO spending time with the new assistant, but neither of them paid attention. What they shared wasn't romantic, at least not at first. It was something deeper, a recognition, a mirror of two souls who had walked through struggle and still believed in kindness. Weeks turned into months. The school access program became an official company initiative. It was approved, funded, and praised by the board. Under Elena's guidance, it reached thousands of students across the country. Newspapers called it Valitech's Heart Project. On the day of the launch, the auditorium was filled with reporters and cameras. Adrian stood on stage to give his speech but paused midway. He looked at the crowd, then at Elena, sitting quietly in the front row. "I once met a girl," he began, "who reminded me what courage really looks like. She didn't ask for money or favors, she only asked for a pair of shoes. And in doing so, she gave me something far greater, perspective." Gasps rippled through the audience. Elena's hands flew to her mouth, her heart racing. He continued, his eyes locked on hers. "Today, that same girl helped us build a project that will change lives. And for that, I owe her more than I can ever repay." The audience erupted into applause. Elena felt her vision blur with tears. She hadn't expected any of this, least of all his acknowledgement. But as he stepped down from the stage and stood beside her, she whispered, "You didn't have to say that." "I did," he said quietly. "The world should know who truly made this possible." That evening, after the event, they found themselves alone on the rooftop terrace. The city lights shimmered below, and the cool night air carried the faint scent of rain. Elena leaned on the railing, gazing at the horizon. "You changed my life, Mr. Vale." He shook his head. "No, you changed mine." They stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken connection between them stronger than words. Then she smiled. "Funny, isn't it? I borrowed your shoes, and somehow we both learned to walk again." He laughed softly. "Maybe that's how fate works. Sometimes you lend something small and get something priceless in return." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "Like hope." "Exactly," he said. As the night deepened, their laughter mingled with the wind. Two souls from different worlds, one rich, one poor, had found the same road. Not because of luck, but because of kindness. And somewhere between the sound of the rain returning and the lights flickering in the distance, they both understood something simple yet eternal. Sometimes, one act of compassion can change not one life, but two. It started with borrowed shoes, and ended with both of them walking toward something far greater. Each other.